That's just
Well, here we are in Southern California in Chicago, and you're on Global TV Talk Show, and we have uh, an alignment of stars. The galaxy is with us today, and may the force be with you to get good information from Paul Falcone, who's the preeminent CHRO. He's been around for a long time, as you could tell. Just look,
he's old. That's right. That's right.
We were just talking off camera here about Paul being in the college band. What did you play?
Oh, I played trumpet.
Trumpet,
UCLA,
and you marched in what, the Rose Bowl?
so UCLA marching band, 1981, 1985, proud to say. I did 2 Rose Bowls. I did a Blue Bonnet Bowl in Houston, and I did a Fiesta Bowl in Tempe, Arizona. So all 4 years we were in bowls.
So how much practice is there of walking around in step so everyone looks like they're in the Army, you know?
You can't believe it. Ed, it's really intense to be able to play you look at these games and they look nice when you watch the band, but it's like, no, there's a lot of work that goes into that, to the step, plus the music. So yeah, it's interesting. It was a great way to get through school. I loved it.
So were there any girls in the band?
Yeah, 50-50.
Oh, yeah. So what did they play? They can't play the violin and walk.
No, we had girl tuba players. We had guy tuba players. We had girl trumpets and boy trumpets. You name it. We split 50-50.
And majorettes, I assume.
Yes, we did at the time. Yeah. Plus, we had Josephine Bruin, who I had a crush on at the time, even though I didn't know what the girl looked like underneath the bear. I loved the bear. It was just a darling bear. So
that wasn't her real name. That's a stage name.
Josephine, yeah, Joe and Josephine Bruin are they're the names of the mascot to this day.
Gary Sanger from LA also, and he's a preeminent retained executive search consultant for major industry for a number of years. He's also president of Kestria USA. What's Kestria?
It's an alliance of recruiting search headhunters across the country, 90 cities, 45 countries. I've been a proud member for about 13 years. And we're an alliance where you as a company, if you're trying to get some talent in Europe or in Asia or here in the US, we can refer it back and forth and you'll be in good hands. So it's really a retained search alliance of fellow business owners of retained search.
So last week, I'm talking to the audience now out there in TV land. Last week, these two guys and several others from around the world joined me in Global TV Talk Show land, and we had a stimulating conversation about the world as it is, the business world, the people world, and what's been going on as a result of the pandemic and the resignation or the realignment or whatever. Paul Falcone, for a long time CHRO in the entertainment industry, was CHRO with Nickelodeon, and will you tell us more about that?
In terms of the background, Ed, or in terms of what we're seeing out there?
Well, first background, so people can get a grip.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was a writer all through my 3 decades of doing human resources. So I've written 15 books. I've written for SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, as a columnist for all those years. And I was head of HR for Nickelodeon.
And you have a new article just been published for SHRM, which we'll get to in a minute. Okay.
Oh, good. I can't wait. That's good. I can't wait to see. No, but the funny thing, you guys, it was nice. I was head of international HR for Paramount Pictures, but I've also worked in healthcare biotech, and I worked in financial services. So for me, it's interesting as a writer, I wanted to make sure that I had enough depth in what I was writing, that it wasn't too industry specific. So I really wanted to work across industries, which I got a chance to do, which is really nice. I'm very thankful for my career, and it's worked really well for me. And then in July of last summer, about 6 months ago, I opened up my own consulting firm for the first time. So I'm on my own. I am a free man, and it's exciting. I'm having a blast.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And, please use Global TV Talk Show as a sounding board and a launch pad for future stuff.
Sure. Thanks.
Okay. Gary Sanger, the world of recruitment of job finding is it's become a blue chip thing since the pandemic. Well, it's always been preeminent, but boy, now it's like companies clamoring for the right touch, the right person, the right tone, the right background, and the right what? Empathy. I mean, is this like a recruiting session for the next pope?
Well, sometimes it seems to be like it's that rare, like it's that needle in the haystack. But I would tell you this, pre-COVID, it was a big imbalance in terms of senior management and executives in terms of the demand. And there was a small supply out there. There really is a small supply of excellent senior management executives to run businesses. It then waned a bit. And this last year, year and a half, we're back into a handful of offers from other companies for our final candidate to be landed. And so I think it behooves you, the company. Who are you? Why do you exist? I mean, that's really a penetrating question. Why do you, the company, exist? What are you out there to do, to accomplish? And what kind of product quality, what kind of efficiency do you have on that? What kind of people does it take to deliver that? And so in simple terms, what's the culture that drives that? And you know your own company culture. You should. From the top, you should be aligned in it. And as you then have that cleanly and clearly and simply defined, that helps that candidate to decide if he or she belongs.
So
If
you're
that's the
talking about
place they
core
wanna go.
traits of the candidate and the company culture in alignment.
Well, I agree. And I think some kind of filter up front that everyone ought to have it. If you're down there at the entry level ranks in blue collar, if you're the middle level of getting all the work done, whether you're administration or you're a manager of people, I think there ought to be some consistency about who you allow into your company. And I think that's really the trick. I think that's really something that is extremely important. And those companies that use their people and give them some freedom to get things done, those are the successful ones.
So what happens when you make a wrong choice? When the board or the hiring manager makes a wrong choice?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, it drives out people that don't want to be there anymore. You get that bad hire, you get that misstep. I don't want to pick on Disney. I just read the papers and I see that the CEO of that organization in 1 year is already out. The former guy being brought back, and that's not my industry, that's Paul's. But it costs millions of dollars when you do it wrong. It also then causes you not to be aligned with your customers as well. It's extremely expensive to have a wrong step. The hard cost.
So let me ask you, in that case, I forget the guy's name, but Chapek or something like that. But Iger is a quintessential personality for the entertainment industry, media. I mean, he's just a larger than life guy and came up through the ranks over the years and did wonderful, made the right choices, and I guess was lucky, but and then he tried to move on, and then like in The Godfather, Michael, he said, you pulled me back in because you're ruining my country, Mr. CEO. I mean, my company, country, yeah. And Paul Falcone, let me ask you, being having an extensive background in the entertainment media industry, it takes a leader. It takes like a gigantic personality to be a showrunner in the entertainment industry, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing, before I add, I didn't mention earlier, Gary is one of my mentors. Gary, you found Gary just like you found me, independent. But Gary Singer's like been a mentor for me for a long time. And Gary, I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. So that's important because we're both in Southern California. So we met over time, but Gary's been wonderful to me. To your point, yeah, so much of it, managing creatives is a different beast. And so much of what we talk about today is how do you get more creativity and innovation out of your employees? And so there's something to be learned about this idea of managing to that creative bent. And it's not management in the sense of, back in the day when we used to have Ford with the lines of car parts and people put widgets on machines as they go along a belt. The reality is knowing how to coach and develop people in the creative space takes a different set of skills. And believe it or not, you need to give them more flexibility, more room to come up with their own ideas. When they talk about psychological safety in the workplace, making it safe for people to suggest things that, may fall flat on their face, the ideas. But you've got to be able to tease that out of people. You got to make sure they know you've got their back, that you want them to do their very best work every day. And they've got to hear that coming from you. You got to walk the talk, because that's where the creativity comes from. You never know where the next idea is going to come from, but it's going to come from the people in the trenches. It's not going to come from management. They're not close enough to the product. But if you can create that space for people to put their best effort forward, to not feel like, oh, I'm going to embarrass myself, to be able to make themselves vulnerable in a very healthy sense. It's like that TED Talk ad that Brene Brown did on the importance of vulnerability. I think it's one of the top 10 TED Talks out there. If you can inject that into your work environment, you'll be surprised how creativity and innovation goes up.
So just as an off-the-wall example here, is just three guys chewing the fat here on this topic. As a quote-unquote writer, this show has no script, but we certainly have an outline. And in my media prep, prior to clicking that button this morning, I looked at talking points that you've each sent me, not only for this show, but for prior experiences. So I get, familiar again with rather than just off the top of this graying head. But there's no script. Now, in Hollywood, there's scripted entertainment, non-scripted. So non-scripted is like a documentary or some kind, but even that's scripted. But like
reality TV is non-scripted, right?
Like Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune is scripted, but the people there, there's no chains on the contestants and how they react or what they do, and
right.
Even the hostess, they're on the top of their game, man, coming right back like that guy last night on Jeopardy. Yeah. I forget his name. Their new host, he's perfect for that
21
role.
nights that he's won. I mean, it's remarkable.
Well, that and the host.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just is a perfect replica of Alex Trebek, in terms of appearance and joie de vivre and the living. What's
that word?
Role.
We didn't have that word when I was growing up in Idaho.
Joie de vivre. So Gary Singer, Paul was giving you heaps of praise here, but I'd like to have you go back into history a little bit and talk about how you met Paul Falcone.
Well, it was in HR roles out here in Southern California. We became friends. I doubt his comment about the mentor thing. We just became friends and we've worked together. I'm going to go back in terms of a snippet of something that was very impactful to me. Now, I'm a farm kid from Idaho. Air Force, taught school a couple of years, starved to death, went back to school, got a degree, and moved to California. I ended up with American Hospital Supply Corporation, one of their divisions. So I didn't know beans about business, quite frankly. And they put me into a personnel HR role where I was supposed to help hire 1,000 folks in a blue collar job. Early on, I was basically the guy that walked around one of the contestants or one of the candidates for the head of finance or head of manufacturing for over 10,000 people. And so he was being interviewed for this job to be the head of 10,000 people, 10 plants, et cetera. And so I was the guy that was walking him around to show him the bathroom, show him where the food was, and making sure he got to each of the interviews. At the end of the interviews, got him on a cab, and he was on his way. My boss said, did you get the feedback? Yes, I did. Here's the notes. He then said, well, what did the guards say? And what did Clara, the receptionist, say? I said, are you kidding? Why would I talk to them? He said, just trust me. I talked to the guard and said, hey, what'd you think of this candidate? And he said, well, he's fine. He's good. I said, come on. I know you, John. Tell me what you really think. He said, I thought he was awful. He treated me as though I was invisible, didn't show any respect. And Clara was worse. She said, literally, he barely spoke to me. And I then thought, that's really a difficult situation where we got that many people that this guy's going to lead. We walked
especially at that level.
At that level, exactly. And so we walked down to the president and he said, Gary, what do you think? I read off the information. He then said, well, what do you think we ought to do? And I said, well, sir, I just got here. He said, look, I didn't hire you not to have an opinion. I said, farm boy, just found my way here. One of the entry-level professional guys on the team. I think because the products we make can kill people if they're done wrong. And if you don't have these folks, these 9,000 folks in the manufacturing organization following you, we can do better. That stuck with me. We called the guy and said, thanks, no thanks, but getting people that really are passionate and aligned. I know this is a long story. I've told it thousands of times over my career, but I think it's really key.
Excellent portrayal of the reality of aligning the candidate with the people, the guard and the lady, because that's the kind of people that this new person would try to fit in with.
Yeah.
So if it's a bad fit, don't try to make it a better fit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So Paul Falcone, in your new company, Paul Falcone HR, what's going to be different than how it was at the Motion Picture Fund?
It's going to be very different, I think, in the sense where I'm enjoying, Gary, to your point, I'm enjoying working with different companies and getting a feel for how they do things differently. It's nice to work across different companies. That gives you a broader perspective on really what's happening out there. And it informs my writing, to tell you the truth, which is nice. And the other thing is I get to focus on the stuff that I love to do. But when I was growing up through HR, the idea of soft skills was really cute. They pat you on the head. You'd want to do training for them on soft skills. And they'd say, well, go back to your office and we'll call you if we need you. Okay, fast forward now into a world of remote work and hybrid work. And what CEOs are being polled on over and over and over again is what is the most important issue? And they keep coming back to the same answer: soft skills. It's the ability to bond with people. It's the ability, even though you're not working side by side, to still be able to forge relationships, to develop that sense of trust and respect and camaraderie. It's hard, Ed. It's more intentional now. It's more purposeful. You don't just get to make it happen by walking over to the water cooler and talking to someone. You have to seek it out. Yet at the same time, what people are realizing is it's those, whatever you want to call it, emotional intelligence, emotional quotient. It's those kinds of abilities to lead that are now at the forefront. And that's what they can't get enough of. And that's where I'm spending a lot of my time doing training in organizations to help raise that level of awareness and help build that management muscle around becoming better people builders.
So I want to ask you, Gary and Paul, if we could have a conversation based upon the social and political divides that are apparent in the U.S. now. We can't close our eyes and hope they go away. And yet, what do we do? How do we deal with this thing? If we do we open a can of worms by bringing it up even? Paul?
There's a good article on that in HR Magazine. No, I had written an article on that about a month ago, and it said,
I didn't know.
Yeah, just pure coincidence. And I knew it was going to be controversial, but the idea was what I was doing with my team, because remember, I was working in HR up to about 6 months ago. What I was doing with my team, because the world has gone so absolute bonkers with everything that's out there and all of our basic assumptions about who we are, I would need to sit with the team every couple of weeks, at least once a month, and talk about how are we all doing? because it wasn't a matter of, they knew the ground rules. This is not to put your point across as to whether you're a blue hat or a red hat, or you believe in this or you believe, that's not what it was. It was just really to talk about how is this all affecting you and how are you doing through this? That company, Ed, to your point, Motion Picture and Television Fund, was a home for retirees from the entertainment industry. It was long-term care, assisted living, right? It was skilled nursing, memory care. It was healthcare. We were exhausted. COVID had wiped us out. And healthcare workers really got hit very hard through the whole COVID pandemic. And it's gone on now for what, 3 years. And so checking in with people and saying, tell us what you're doing, tell us how you're feeling, what can we do to help, makes such a big difference because people know you care. And that's where you need to make that space. You can't keep telling people don't ask for vacations. You need to work 7-day shifts. You need to work double shifts. And by the way, we don't want to hear about how you're doing. But historically, it was anathema to ask people about things in their personal lives or about religion and politics and all that stuff. So we keep the specifics out, but we ask how the effect on the employees is going. People really appreciate it. They need to let steam off. They need to let that air out sometimes because the balloon just fills up with too much air. You've got to find a safe way to let that air out of the balloon.
Gary, is this a sissy issue?
No, it's a real issue. It's an absolute real issue. I think one of the core things, if you got in a group at a social setting or a business setting, I've always been told you got 2 of these and you got 1 of these. How do you listen? How do you pay attention? How do you take in data? And so the listening skill of taking in data, getting the perspective, you, the corner office person, or you, the manager, do you have the full picture or are you talking all the time? I think then to go to the basics, why does this company exist? What's it trying to get done? And what's the scoreboard that you and your job are paid, and probably paid very handsomely, to get done? And so I think then, what's the influence on your customers? What are they dealing with? We hear all about the supply chain and a mess that it is. We hear about the hybrid side of being in the office or being out of the office, or, don't come in because COVID, we're having another uptick of that here in Southern California. So I think it's the issue about, do you know the pulse of your customer? Do you know the pulse of your people? Are you listening? Are you reacting? And some people just don't belong anymore. I think maybe one of the elephants in the room many times, who shouldn't be on your team? Who's not getting it done? Who is not happy? And who is spreading that doom cloud? That door's not locked. I think having people leave constructively and doing it professionally, I think that's a big deal. And many companies just don't pay attention to that.
Paul, you recently had a post that I read that intrigued me about don't fire somebody right away, put them on a paid leave, but just get them away.
Yeah, the point to that, Ed, is that there was an article on don't rush to judgment, don't rush to terminate.
Yeah.
A lot of times companies, what they do is they don't hold the person accountable. They don't issue any progressive discipline. And then some proverbial straw is broken on the camel's back. And the guy's got to be gone now. I can't, blah, blah, blah. And it's like too much drama. Put the person on a paid leave for a couple of days and give yourself a chance to investigate, do whatever you need to do so that you're being responsible as an employer. And there's also something to your point called a decision-making leave. The decision-making leave, the idea of that is when you've got someone, Gary, to your point, shows that they're not happy, they're constantly complaining, blah, 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 blah. You can place them on a 1-day paid leave. And you sit with them and say, tomorrow, I want you to stay home. You don't do any work. Tomorrow's your day to rethink whether you want to be part of this organization. And if you really do, then when you come back the day after tomorrow, you need to send me a letter. Because remember, I'm paying you for the time tomorrow. If you choose to resign, we're okay with that. We'll be friends, no harm, no foul. I'll help you with whatever I can, and I'll respect your decision. But if you choose to come back, you need to come back a new person. And I want a 1-letter commitment, one-page letter from you saying that you're aware of this perception problem that you're creating, and that you're holding yourself accountable for fixing it going forward. And I think I don't use it a lot, but when I do use it, it tends to work very, very effectively. It's like for the right person in the right circumstance, it gives them a taste of unemployment is what it does. It makes them realize I better not take this for granted, even though I've been here for 30 years. A lot of times that entitlement mentality is what kicks in, and you need to create a safe space for them to rethink whether they want to stay with the organization or not.
I want to add to that because I think that's a tremendously constructive approach. The real judge and jury in this, it's the employee base. This is your
they're watching.
Yeah, they're watching. They're seeing how that person is handled, how they're treated. Is there some respect? Usually management's the last to know that somebody shouldn't be there. They've been a PITA, a pain in the backside, for a long time. And usually the company, the boss, is the last one to know. So, isn't it terrible? Executives, HR, they're spending disproportionately amount of time on those folks that aren't performing. Why don't you spend that on the great guys, the great gals, the ones that are fantastic? Why don't you spend time with them, on them, supporting them, developing them, rather than this guy or gal that didn't want to be there anyway? I just always think it's almost laughable, but it's sad that, disproportionately, those laggards are the ones that are getting most of the attention.
So audience, as you know, from the PR, Dr. Natalie Forrest in Hamburg, Germany, was supposed to be with us today, but she was called into an emergency session. I'm getting a note here. And she will be with us on December 13. And if you both would like to join us on that program, there'll be several others, then I certainly welcome you. And of course, Dr. Natalie. So let's go for another 6 or 7 minutes and gear up about facing reality about people not wanting to be in the office, but they love the job and they want to be productive and they want to contribute. Yes, maybe I'll come in, but I really don't want to do the commute. I don't want to, I hate to say this, but I don't want to waste my time in small talk with people who don't care about me, but I should care about them and they should care about me because we're trying to help the company. So this working from home thing and remote has developed that freedom of thought that ordinarily, as an employee, you would never hear that. But now you do. So how do you manage? How do you motivate? Paul?
Hybrid's here to stay. And it should be. What we've proven, we had just-in-time technology and Zoom and Microsoft Teams and other things to show that we could make this work. But this has been brewing for a long time, Ed. This isn't new. The reality was COVID released it. It gave it voice, but this has been happening for a long time. When you look at, the saying is demographics is destiny. And you look at where the trends are with the Gen X, the Gen Y, the Gen Z. First of all, Gen X, the 42 to 57-year-olds, they want this more than oxygen. They've been polled. They want this flexibility for the first time in their lives. They're like, wait a second, I could have some kind of a work-life balance or equilibrium or with my family. So they're dead set on this. What we're seeing now is a little bit of a pullback from the Gen Y millennials and the Gen Z zennials. The Gen Y is the 40 and under crowd and the zennials are the 25 and under crowd. They're starting to push to go back to the office a little bit more. A, because they feel lonely and isolated, but B, because they want face time to grow their careers. The Gen Xers aren't worried about growing their careers and less is more for them. So the reality becomes, I think we just need to make sure we are not tone deaf to what these generational differences are, and figuring out how to find that balance going forward is actually kind of creative. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Gary?
3 times as many people are in the hybrid job role from 3 years ago. And the projection is that's going to continue. See, I think it makes clear communication all the more important. I think it needs to have, I'm a sports nut. I'm absolutely crazy on sports. What would sports be like without a scoreboard? You think about it, there wouldn't be those bottom of the ninth and you're down a couple runs and 2 outs, 2 on, and Kirk Gibson comes to the plate. I was there. I was absolutely off the charts. And there was a fourth of the crowd in their cars driving off. Now they'll claim to have still been there, but keeping score, what the heck are you employed for, being paid for? And for your job, your department, your company, what is it that you're supposed to accomplish? So I think that clarity, you find companies that do this well, their productivity and efficiency, both of those are better than they've ever been. Because also the good employees are working harder, they're more dedicated. Now it takes more effort. And for us to communicate right here live on a Zoom, with a couple square inch picture of each other. Now it helps that the three of us know each other, but it really takes clear communication, clear scoreboards, clear follow-up. And I think that's one of the huge keys for that.
So in executive search now, that's a leading question, isn't it? Can that person who's applying for this job and you're searching for them, how are they going to manage this remote issue? I mean, that before was never talked about, right?
Well, some of it was, in the sales thing, you weren't always there in person. But again, clarity, what's key for the results you're trying to get? Number two, what's the background that he or she should have had? Now, I have a database of 75,000 people. I have access to millions through our 4 seats on LinkedIn. And so how do I square that down and get that to a few dozen folks? Depending on what's important to you for the educational background. Size matters as it relates to the size of companies and staff and budget that you may have had before. If you've always been in big companies and this is a small company, you can't hide there. And so what's key to you? Again, the basic ABC question, why you, Mr. XYZ company? Why do you exist? And what is your role to make that company bigger, better, faster, and grow more?
So a lot of the people that are working remotely are female for a number of reasons. But on a recent broadcast, I had a guest, a gentleman by the name of Chase Eskelson, who is an expert in education tech and advanced practices, and he's a consultant. So anyway, we talked about this new idea, relatively speaking, of microschooling, which used to be called the one-room schoolhouse, bringing together a very, very young and not so young, and then an older, and they're learning different things, but they're in the same small space for a period of time, live, in person, in a room. But the innovation here is that the microschool concept has transmitted sometimes away from a strip center shopping mall situation that's convenient to neighborhoods into standalone campus with an athletic field outside the building, and it's attracted some venture capital as well, particularly in Phoenix area and Las Vegas, where there's more room, I guess, to experiment. Nicer weather,
more dirt.
Yeah, dirt. So my point is that I've read about companies, large corporations, buying a charter or a license or something to set up a microschool system on campus in the corporate setting, and using that as a golden handcuff kind of a thing to attract women back into the company and into the office, and because the kids will be right there on premises with loose restrictions on time to visit or whatever. And it becomes like Wow, that's a great idea. And as employee benefit, as a recruitment tool, as a differentiator in terms of choosing what company I should go to work for or stay with. Paul, is this crazy making, or do you think it's a good idea?
No, yeah, honestly, I'm not that familiar with it. I was on that same podcast that we did, so it was the first time I had heard of it. But it does make sense if you think about it. One of the key places you need this is when you're dealing with multiple generations in the workforce. We've got 5 generations in the workforce right now. It's the first time that's ever happened historically. And how do you bring these groups together? And I always refer people back to the movie The Intern with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway. I tell people that you need to make that an assignment where your people sit around and watch that movie together on company time, because it shows all the value that the different generations, primarily the elderly generations, can share, the wisdom with the newer generations. But to your point too, anything that we can do to try and harmonize that work-life balance, that family issue, we have the kids closer. Yeah, that will bring people back to the workplace, because one thing we know about COVID is when the schools were closed, mom had to stay home to take care of the kids. That was a paradigm that was not uncommon. Of course, sometimes it was the father too, but it primarily fell upon mothers. So we saw this disproportionate hit of women in the workplace who they had to self-select out to take care of their kids. When push comes to shove, you'll forego the job to take care of a child. And because that impacts females as a rule, generally more than men, we want to find a way to bring women back into that workplace. This is a way to do it. So it all makes a lot of sense to me. I can see where there's a lot of investing eyeballs on a proposition like this.
Gary?
Well, I just think as you rate what's important to you, and if you are married or not, if you have kids, usually the kids take the top of the list. We just recently had a major relocation of an executive from the Midwest, from Michigan, into Arizona. And one of the speed bumps on it, I'm not thinking of the right word here. One of the caveats was we have to get into an area that has great schools. And number 2, we have a 2-year-old that has to have incredible childcare, because the person we were relocating, his spouse had a bigger job than he did. And so that was a caveat that if that's not met, this whole deal is off. So when you look at what's important, and you, the company, are satisfying a need that has to be done. I mean, I think this whole COVID time period was the toughest on those moms that were working, that had to also take care of their kids. And the kids were back and forth, especially here in California, as to whether the COVID kept them in school or they had to be homeschooled. Man, that was an incredibly tough challenge.
Well, mental stress.
Yes.
I can just imagine working, and maybe they don't have the bandwidth in the house, then who's fighting for computer time. And I mean, God, that's a headache just thinking about that. It makes you want to run away. Never mind get away from work, just run away from the whole situation.
Well, it was challenging, and those that could pivot, those companies that pivoted into some areas that they hadn't done work on, it's almost the pivot way back when into the war. It was survival of the country. Here it's the survival of the company, survival of the family. It was a very, very big deal. We didn't have a playbook for this. We did not have a playbook for this, and how companies did that. Who has the empathy and who sees what the painful needs are, and how do you differentiate your company by paying attention to those things where many of the other companies didn't.
Okay, now I have to sum up. I'd love to continue this. Please come back on Global TV another time, not just on December 13. That's a little short notice, maybe, but we'll certainly do it in the new year, at least once a month, and bring together different people. Paul, and Gary also, but Paul first. Knowing what we just talked about and the spirit of what we just talked about, who should see this show? Who should I target distribution to? I have a laser targeting program. Okay.
It's funny you bring it up, Ed. everyone needs to hear this show in the sense where this is good for everybody who's in a business capacity in one form or another, but small business owners. I think that's really where this focus needs to be. Quick story, my 2 kids had changed jobs in the last year. My daughter's 32, son is 29, and both of them left because of the way their company handled COVID. In one situation, one of my kids said, I was in a meeting where the CEO was there. They announced that the CFO had COVID. CEO said, don't tell anybody, they don't need to know. And my son was like,
that's
whoa.
terrible.
Yeah. Then my daughter's situation was working for someone who said everyone needs to come back to work. If I hear the word COVID or if I hear the word remote, someone's getting fired. I want everybody back to work Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, period, no exceptions. And it just comes across as tone deaf. The reality is these changes are happening, and you can't sit back and dismiss that, oh, these millennials are all spoiled and entitled. The baby boom was 77 million. That was the biggest we had ever seen. And they're moving towards retirement very quickly. Gen Y is 80 million. They're bigger than the baby boom. That's why no one can get into college these days. You have to understand this is your future. Understand what this workforce wants. It's not unreasonable. In light of the times we live in, just adapt these, be an early adopter of what these changes are, and you'll find so many benefits for your company. But don't keep resisting this stuff, because this is real. And we've polled these generations. We know what Gen Y and Gen Z wants more than any other generation in its past. They are the most studied, generational cohorts in world history. What they're asking for is reasonable. Work-life family balance, we can help them with that. They need that. So anyway, I think that small business owners will benefit the most from what we had to say.
Paul, see, I don't think the small part should be part of your description. I think any company manager, any company owner, any company executive, I would encourage you to go re-recruit your stars, re-recruit those people that are getting the job done for you, that are taking, this journey in COVID. And I'm sorry, executives that act that way, the word stupid was in my mind, and I won't say it here. We'll just have it amongst the 3 of us. But I'm sorry, Ms. or Mr. Executive, if that's how you feel, I hope your board retained me to go replace you, because that's awful. That's absolutely awful.
Not only that, but it's threatening. If there was somebody who was saying, the CFO, who's a powerful person within the organization, has COVID, and you know about it, and I'm instructed to not say anything, that means that you want all these people to come back in and be exposed to this risk.
I know, it's just
that is multiple lawsuits tomorrow.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, re-recruit your stars, tell them how you appreciate them. And if you're imbalanced with what the pay is or what the levels ought to be, that's in time of difficulty. That's where the great people shine. That's where they have the participation, of your customers, of your community, of your staff. It's just so much opportunity for you to be above it and be fair, and have the integrity.
PaulFalconeHR.com, right?
Yeah, that's it, Ed. Thanks.
Gary Sanger, what's your website or LinkedIn that people should go and see?
Yes, SangerAssociates.com. Founded it back in 1999.
And you partied ever since, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
Hey,
indeed.
thanks,
Ed,
guys.
it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you
very much
for including us. And I've got to leave now and go carry Paul's bag as he goes to his next presentation.
Okay, ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Gary.